Om Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I'm not sure, according to my computer, my sound system is not working. Ronnie Ty Prabhu, can you hear me okay? I think the only microphone I've got is on the computer. Can you comment?
Yes, okay.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. Nice to see you this morning. So, good morning, dear devotees from Sri Jagannath Puri Dham. My name is Madhavananda Das. These are a series of talks we're giving. We're calling Meeting in Kurukshetra. This is our 91st session. And today we want to speak something, again, from the 47th chapter of the 10th canto, which is called Brahmara-gita, or the Song of the Bumblebee. It's Radharani's mad talks with the bumblebee, and speaks about the message that Krishna sent to the Gopis through Uddhava. And now we're hearing something about the reply of the Gopis. And today I wanted to title this Connections, the Brahmara-gita, meeting Kurukshetra, and Siksastaka in Jagannath Puri Dham. Gora Draganya Gana Gocha Goloruharam Goranga Guratama Gopya Kopa Briksham Gopala Gada Ratidam Yati Singha Gora Govinda Deshikavaram Satatam Namami. Artaika Saranam Krishnam Artanja Brajavidyanam Chatam Tam Chatasvasakam Bhaktam Archavande Durashaya. I offer my vandana with Artaika, with a hopeless heart, but Artaika Saranam. I'm taking shelter of Krishna, who's Artan Brajajanam Chitan, who's the only shelter for persons who are suffering, and he's the only shelter for the suffering people of Braj. Tam Chatasvasakam Bhaktam Artya Vande Darasaya. I am offering my pranams to Uddhava, who alleviated their suffering. So just looking back a little bit in our last week's session, we spoke something from the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, from this 47th chapter, about the nature of the Gopis and how the Gopis don't want anything for themselves. And we read something from an excerpt from a transcription of a lecture our Guru Maharaj gave here in Bhubaneswar. And let's see if I can post this on the screen here. It's really beautiful. There we go. Guru Maharaj said, everyone desires their own happiness. He who has less desire for his own happiness is Mahat Vyakti, a great personality. He who is completely indifferent to his own happiness is Sumahat, a very great personality. For those who are giving pleasure and happiness to Krishna at the cost of their own happiness are Param Mahan, supremely great. They are worshipable. They are the Gopis. This is the nature of Gopi Bhav, that they don't want anything for themselves. They simply want the pleasure of Krishna. And we read something from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Anjalila chapter 20, wherein Sri Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami gives a commentary on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Siksastaka prayers. And when Mahaprabhu speaks about Asli Seva Padavatam Panasti Mamadarshanam Mahatam Karotiva, he gives a number of verses speaking about this. And he says this verse means that someone doesn't desire any of their own pleasure. And he gave an example about a Brahmin who was suffering from leprosy. And we told that story. That Brahmin's name was Kaushik. It's told in the Padma Purana, the Garuda Purana, Markandeya Purana. And he had a wife whose name was Sindili. And she was such a chaste wife. He instructed her that I want to go to such and such prostitute. That's my desire. As a chaste wife, she said, yes, my dear husband. And she carried him on her shoulders to that prostitute. And on the way, her husband's foot accidentally bumped into Mandavya Muni. And Mandavya Muni, who was, it's a long story, but he was on a stick. he became very angry and cursed him that whoever kicked me with his foot, they'll die at sunrise. And when Sandili, his wife, heard this, she said, if I'm really chaste, then the sun won't rise. And so then the sun didn't rise that day or the next day and went on for a number of years. And the Devatas were very disturbed, so they approached Lord Brahma for help. And he told them that the sun can't rise because of this pativrata, this Shakti, this chaste wife. So if you want to change your mind, if you want things to go back to the way they were, you should go to Anasuya, the wife of Atri Muni. And if she's pleased with it, then she can arrange things again. So they went to Anasuya, and Anasuya in turn went to Sandili and begged her to help. And she agreed that her husband would fall over dead, but then be brought back to life, and he was given again a young body. So in the 43rd verse of this chapter, we're now speaking about the Gopis' response to Krishna's message, which is given through Uddhava. And the Gopis, they said an interesting thing. This is the 43rd verse of this chapter. Ta kim nishasmadati yasu tada priyabir Vrindavane kumudukunde sasankaramye re mekvanachchadana nupararasa gostyam asmabir idita manogya kata kadachit. Reading from the BBT translation. The Gopis said, does Krishna recall those nights in the Vrindavan forest, lovely with lotus, jasmine, and the bright moon, as we glorified his charming pastimes? He enjoyed with us, his beloved girlfriends, in the circle of the rasa dance, which resounded with the music of ankle bells. So we spoke a little on this verse in our last session, how the Gopis were very, very disturbed. Why were they disturbed? They were disturbed because they're thinking that Krishna's in Mathura with these other ladies. Now, as we mentioned in our last session, conditioned souls have the fault of known as Atmavan Mandite Jagat. They project whatever suffering I'm going through, whatever attitude I have, other people must have the same attitude. And so if we hear that the Gopis at Vrindavan are unhappy because Krishna went to Mathura and he's with some other ladies, we naturally think they must be jealous. And sometimes it appears like that. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Sarartha Darshini explains in a very deep thing. The Gopis were so disturbed because they were thinking, not that Krishna's with some other ladies, but they're thinking that Krishna's not going to get full happiness, full pleasure, because there's no Vrindavan forest there, there's no Govardhan Hill there, there's no Rasastali there. So we're going to die in disappointment, they're thinking, because Krishna doesn't have a proper level of bliss. This is the nature of the Gopis. So going on to the verses for today, text number 44, the Gopis told Uddhava, Apyeshatiya dasarhas tapta swakritaya sucha sanjivayam nuno gatra yatendro vanam abudai. He said an interesting thing. They're speaking to Uddhava in their madness. They said, will that descendant of Dasara return here and by the touch of his limbs bring back to life those who are now burning with the grief he himself has caused? Will he save us in that way, just as Lord Indra brings a forest back to life with his water-bearing clouds? In Sarta Darshini, Vishwanath says there's a conversation going on. And one Gopi, she tells the other, she says, Sakis, because Krishna's very unhappy, he's going to return immediately here. And another Gopi said, yes, you must be correct. Huh? Will Krishna really come to Braj and bring us who are burning with grief because of him back to life with the touch of his beautiful hand? In Brihad Vaishnav Toshini, Sanatana Goswami also describes a conversation with the Gopis. And one of them saying that if he remembers us, he's going to return. But we don't believe that he remembers us. So we don't believe that he's going to return. So this is interesting, Sanatana Goswami points out, and it's why I wanted to read also the 43rd verse, which we also went over in our last session. The Gopis were, in the previous verse, they were speaking about the Ras Leela. And does Krishna remember this Ras Leela? And they're indicating, yes, Krishna remembers this Ras Leela. And then in the very next verse, they're forgetting all about that. They forgot what they just said. So then they're asking, is he going to return? Now he's the king of the Dasaras, and he's busy protecting. Now I want to speak something about who are the Dasaras, and why is it that the Gopis here are referring to Krishna as Dasara, the descendant of Dasara. Who is that personality? And why are they using this example? It's a very beautiful, very subtle point. So the Gopis are saying, Sanatana Goswami says that Krishna is now the king of the Dasaras, and he's busy protecting them. So we're suffering. And our suffering is out of grief. It's caused by Krishna's behavior. So the only remedy, the only medicine for our suffering is Krishna's touch. And if Krishna doesn't do that, then he's going to be known as expert at being very hard-hearted and fearless about killing women. So he should bring us to life, Sanjeevanayan, by the touch of his limbs. That touch of Krishna is like nectar. So who is this Dasara? This is an interesting point, which many Vaishnavas may not be aware of. There's a section in the Shiva Purana called the Panchakshara Mahatmya. And it's a glorification of a particular Shaiva mantra, the Panchakshara mantra, which we're not going to go into that. But it tells a story about this king Dasara. And Krishna, he's born as a descendant in this line, the Dasaras. And so sometimes he's called Dasara. So very long ago, there was a king of Kashi who had a daughter whose name is Kalavati. And in her youth, she got this mantra, the Shaiva Panchakshara mantra. And then later she was married by Dasara, the king of Mathura. But this Dasara, he's a king of Mathura, but he was a papi. He was a sinful personality. He had some pop. And when he touched Kalavati, Kalavati was a very saintly lady. When he touched her, she felt very, very hot. And Kalavati told him that it's because of your sin. So she took Dasara to Gargamuni. And Gargamuni chanted some mantras over him and made him stand in Jamuna. And then a group of crows came down and they took away his pop. And this is one reason why also crows are known as the symbol of pop, or the symbols of sin. So when those crows went away, they took away all the pop of that Dasara. So here the Gopis are telling Krishna through Uddhava that Krishna, he's the descendant of the Dasara. And by the touch of his limbs, in other words, by the touch of this mantra that Gargamuni had done, it took away the burning of Kalavati's body. So in the same way, we're also burning, the Gopis say. We're burning in the fire of this Vipralamba Agni. And so Krishna should come. He's a descendant of Dasara. His personality, just by his touch, the heat went away from the body of Kalavati. So he should touch us in the same way. And then the pain that we're experiencing in separation from him will go away. And it's just like Yatendra Vanam Abudai. Just like Indra, he brings a forest back to life with his water-bearing clouds. So in the same way, sometimes there's a forest fire, and all the trees in the forest are being threatened with death, being burned up. So Indra comes and he rains down. Sangsara Davanadaluda Loka, Tanayakali Ganatam. He's a Gana. He's like a rain cloud. And he's raining down this water, which puts out that fire. So Krishna, if he's really, really merciful, he should put out this fire, and he should come. And specifically, he should touch our bodies. So these are the words of the Gopis. The Gopis, someone commented after our last kata that, I can't remember exactly what their question was, but in one of the commentaries, I think it was Sanatana Goswami said that the Gopis were thinking, if there's just one lady in Mathura, even if there's one lady in Mathura who can serve Krishna properly, then we'll get some happiness. But then they went on to lament that there's no one in Mathura who's happy, who's qualified, and Krishna's not going to get any happiness. So the question came, well, that seems contradictory. On one hand, they're saying one thing, and then later they say something else. But this is the nature of the Gopis' speech. It's unmadana. They're in a state of unmadana, of divine madness. And they're having this pratijalpa, these mad talks. And one point they say one thing, and then the next point they become mad and they completely forget about the previous thing they said. So in this verse, this 44th verse that we're hearing from, he's saying, will he return? Will he remember us? But in the previous verse, they were just telling Uddhava that Krishna remembered us and he danced with us in the Rasa Leela. But then in the very next verse, they forget all about that. This is a symptom of their madness. So then in text 45, the Gopis go on to tell Uddhava, Kasmat Krishna ihayati prapta rajo patahitaha narendra kanya udvaya prita sarva suridbritaha. I said, why should Krishna come here? After he has this prapta raja, he's gotten this big kingdom, now he's a big man, he's gone to Mathura, he's killed his enemies, he's married the daughters of different kings. He must be satisfied there. See now, but previously they were thinking that he's not satisfied, but now they're thinking Sarva Surid Brita, and so he's surrounded by all his well-wishers, so he must be Prita, he must be happy in that way. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Sarita Darshan says that when one of the gopis, the Bhamya Gopi, heard the previous comment about the Rasa Leela, this gopi became annoyed and she said, hey, you foolish women, you don't know, you don't understand what happiness Krishna gets from the Rasa Leela. So you should hear from me what type of happiness he likes. And so in this way, Vishnu says she's exposing herself. What is she exposing? She's exposing her understanding of Krishna's heart, her intimacy with Krishna. So then that same gopi, she speaks this verse. As we mentioned previously, Srila Sridhar Swami's Bhavarta Deepika commentary, he says that these verses are spoken by different gopis. So now she speaks this verse, and she says, why will Krishna return to Braj? Here Krishna has to do hard work. He has to herd the cows. He has to go out all day long. It's very difficult. And in Mathura, he's got a kingdom. Here, Krishna can only do pastimes with some gopis, some ladies who are cowherd ladies. From the West, we don't understand this very much. We think, oh, cowherd persons must be very elevated. But in India, you see some fellow with a stick, and he sits with the cows all day long. He's not considered to be the most educated, elevated person. It's considered to be, generally speaking, a low-class kind of person. The activity is very high class, and cows are worshipped, but they generally don't appreciate such persons. So the gopis are saying in this way, we're just cowherd ladies. What are we? And now Krishna's in Mathura. Wow. He can associate with all these very high class royal ladies, Kshatriya ladies. So what kind of happiness can Krishna get here? Krishna here, he's a gwala. He's a cowherd boy. He has to go and milk the cows every day. But there, Krishna's a king. And after some time, you see Krishna's going to get married there. So Jiva Goswami, in Laghu Vaishnava Toshan, he comments, as we're just touching on a few of the different comments from Acharyas. One of the gopis says that if you say Krishna is going to come here, I say it's not going to happen. And this gopi now, she's giving the reasons. Because he's got a kingdom, he's killed his enemies. He'll come because you're suffering in separation. Another gopi says this. He's going to come because you're suffering in separation. And the other one replies, no, he's going to marry the princesses. We're just cowherd people. He's going to be more comfortable with the Kshatriya women. And definitely among them, he's going to get a lover. And then he'll be pleased. Prita. Meaning this way. Another one says, that may be so. but still he's going to come here to please his dearest friends in Braj and his mother and father. And another one says he's gotten all of his friends, so he's not going to give regard to any others. Or if he tries to come here, his friends who are there, they'll try to stop him. So the gopis, they're expressing some humility here. At one point, the gopis are expressing these deep feelings of unhappiness to the point they want to commit suicide. They want to kill themselves because they think Krishna's not getting the ultimate happiness. He's just with these ladies in Mathura. And then the next moment, in their madness, they start glorifying those ladies in Mathura and saying, actually, Krishna will be happy. In the 46th verse, the gopis tell Uddhava, Kim asmabir bonakobir anyabhirva mahatmanaha Sripatir aptakamasya kritarta kritatmanaha. He said, this Krishna, he's a very great soul. He's a Mahatma. He's the Lord of Lakshmi Devi. And he gets whatever he desires. So we're just, who are we? We're just forest dwellers. We're just Vanokobir. Vana means a forest. We're just personalities whose residence is living in the forest. How can we fulfill his desires, his purposes, when he's such a Mahatma? He's Krita Atma, Artha Krita Atma. His purposes are complete in himself. He's Aptakam and Atmaram. So this is a very beautiful point we should try to understand. We're going so slow on these things, as Krishna Chaitanya Maharaj commented. He said he was listening to some of the series and he said, you're inching your way along to Kurukshetra. Because we want to understand the Bhagavatam. And the greatest mystery in the Bhagavatam is, why did Krishna leave Vrindavan? And if we can understand why Krishna left Vrindavan, then we can understand the feelings which take place in the Brahmara-gita, the 47th chapter, the 10th canto. We can understand what happens in Kurukshetra when the Gopis and Krishna meet. And then we can understand Brihad Bhagavatamrita, where Sanatana Goswami speaks about how Krishna was feeling separation in Dwarka from the Gopis. And we can understand then the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Antalila, where it's described that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was relishing the feelings that Radharani and the Gopis had when they met with Uddhava in this 47th chapter, the 10th canto. So this is a very, very foundational chapter, and it permeates the entire Bhagavatam. I would be so bold as to suggest that Krishna's leaving Vrindavan is the most important aspect of the Bhagavatam. And this is something that we see throughout our Goswami writings, either Anvaya or Virekavim, directly or indirectly. They're speaking about the subject. How do we understand Krishna's leaving Vrindavan? The entire Lalita Madhava is on this subject. They've spoken about extensively in Ujjana Mani. Mukta Charit begins at this subject of Radha Das Goswami. Sanatana Goswami speaks a lot about this, and we have Bhagavatamrita. And in the commentaries of each other, so many places are expressing this thing. So I'd like to try to analyze a little deeper these feelings of the Gopis. In the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, in the 5th chapter, the 3rd canto, Srila Sanatana Goswami describes the nature of bhakti. He says, Tat karma jnana yogadi sadhana dhritasthitam savata narapikshena bhushitam dainyamulakam. He says that this bhakti, it's very, very different from karma, jnana, and yoga. And he says that at every stage of this bhakti, this is an important point. At every stage, it says sadhana durata stitam. Every stage of this bhakti, it's different from karma, jnana, and yoga. Every stage is indifferent to them, and bhushitam dainya mulakam. This bhakti is decorated by indifference, bhushitam, narapikshena bhushitam. It's decorated by indifference to karma, jnana, and yoga. And dainya mulakam, the root of this bhakti, is humility. There's a beautiful commentary Sanatana Goswami speaks on about this verse. He says that someone may naturally wonder here, there's so many other duties and activities of purification that should be continued along with bhakti. Should we follow all the rules and regulations of Varnashram Dharma? Should I follow Gyan? Should I cultivate an understanding of the difference between spirit and matter, understanding I'm not this body? Should I cultivate that? Should I practice some yoga and some austerities, practicing different mantras or the disciplines? And Narad Muni, who's speaking this verse, Sanatana Goswami points out, he says that all of these things, starting with karma, may assist in the sadhana of love of God, but they only assist in the very early stages. And only in the early stages are they any use. And Rupa Goswami speaks about this in the nutshell verse of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. One verse, which is the nutshell of the entire Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Anyabhilasita shunyam jnana kamadi anabitam anukulina krishna nusiranam bhakti utam. That this anyabhilasita or other desires should be shunyata. And then he's an interesting thing, jnana karma adi anabitam. Jnana, karma, and adi means etc. And Jiva Goswami in his commentary explains that adi means Varnashram Dharma. It means doing austerities. It means dharma, bretta, tyaga, hutadi, doing fire sacrifices, following Varnashram Dharma, and this and that. Jnana karma adi anabritam. He uses the word anabritam. He could have said sunyatam. No gyan, no karma, no varnashram, sunyatam. And Jiva Goswami comments that he says anabritam, it shouldn't cover bhakti, indicating that in the beginning of one's practice of bhakti, these things might be beneficial. It may be beneficial to understand, have some gyan that I'm not my body. It may be beneficial to practice some varnashram dharma. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, as long as someone has material desires, they must follow some varnashram dharma, but they don't depend upon it. And this is the point Jiva Goswami explains about this verse in Yabhilasita Shunyam. Jiva Goswami says that how is it that it may cover bhakti? He said it may cover bhakti in one of two ways. One is that you may think that it's the goal, this gyan or this karma or this varnashram dharma is the goal. This is why I'm doing bhakti, so that I can become a proper varnashram wala, a good wife or a good husband, a good practitioner of varnashram dharma. And that's covering bhakti. So it shouldn't cover bhakti. And the second way that it may cover bhakti is that someone may think, oh, unless I do these things, unless I practice karma, jnana, yoga, varnashram, then I can't practice bhakti. Bhakti is dependent upon these things, and that also is covering bhakti. Bhakti is swarat. Bhakti sanjayate bhakti, it says in 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. From bhakti comes bhakti. In 1968, in a lecture in Los Angeles, Srila Prabhupada was questioned by one of Prabhupada's early sannyas disciples, whose name was slipping my mind right now. He left his body a few years ago. Anyway, was questioned by this devotee who's known as the Emperor of Kirtan. Prabhupada gave him that name. Not Vishnu. Anyway, was questioned by him, Prabhupada, I don't understand, should we follow all this varnashram things? And Prabhupada told him, he said, were you practicing varnashram before you came here? No, they were all taking drugs and running around naked. Some of the earliest disciples, they met Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada went to Morning Star Ranch, which is a nudist colony. And some of the Vishnu Jana Maharaj and Tamal Krishna Maharaj had no clothes on. The first time they met Srila Prabhupada. So it wasn't that they were following Varnashram Dharma. Prabhupada said, your good fortune has come from me. This is Bhakti Sanjayate Bhakti. So Sanatana Goswami in his commentary on Brihad Bhagavatamrita, then he goes on to say that devotees therefore should disregard those methods. Don't take shelter of karma, jnana, or yoga. You may take shelter of it somewhat if your guru tells you, but you should understand that I'm doing this because this will keep me, will help protect me so I don't fall down from bhakti. But bhakti is what we want. And Sanatana Goswami says, don't pay so much heed to all those other methods. Just focus on bhakti, hearing, chanting, remembering, etc. And then Sanatana Goswami, in Brihad Bhagavatam, Narad Muni speaking, the Narad Muni, he defines what is dainya, what is humility. Yenya sadhana sakta dhamma buddhi sadatmani sarva karsandite pisyad buddhaista dainyam ishyate. He says, Buddhais tat dainyam ishyate. Wise people, dainyam ishyate. They say this is dainya. So what is that dainya? Dainya, or humility, is when someone thinks himself, they're asakta, they're asadharana asakta. They're asadharana means very strongly, very exceptionally. They're asakta. They have no potency. They have no ability. They have no strength on their own. They're asakta and they're adama. They're fallen. This buddhi, this intelligence that they have, which is sadatmani, always present in themselves, this is dainya. So this dainya, it's not the same as when someone's very poor. Someone's very poor, they may be very humble also. I remember doing Harinam once in Germany with Satchidananda Maharaj. And there was one person who was, as the devotees were going by, he was on his knees with folded hands and he was praying, begging to people. That person has some humility. But that humility is not what Narad Muni is defining here as dainya. That humility is not just being free from egotism. This humility is a very, very deep thing. With someone, they thinking, I'm asakta, I have no ability. I'm adama, I'm very, very fallen. So someone who has this, Narad Muni says, paradoxically, that someone who has this kind of dainya, actually they have all good qualities. They think they don't, but in actuality they do. And then Brihad Bhagavatam goes on to explain that real humility comes from Krishna prema. Dainyam tu paramam premna paripakena janyate tasam gokulanadinam eva Krishna viyogataha. He says that dainyam tu paramam, that the topmost level of dainya is prema. And the example of it, paripakena janyate, paka means something which is ripe. You ask for a fruit, I want a paka fruit, not a kacha fruit. So paripakena janyate, you should know that the fully ripened love of God, this is Tasham Gokulanadina. This is found in the ladies of Gokul, but Eva Krishna Viyogataha, when they were separated from Krishna. So this is a 47th chapter of the 10th canto. This is a Brahmara-gita. This is a subject of Brihad Bhagavatam. This is a subject of Siksastaka prayers in Jagannath Puri. And this is the subject of the separation that the Gopis are feeling in Kurukshetra, even though Krishna's personally present there. In their madness, they're feeling like Krishna's not present. In their madness, they're thinking, oh, for so long Krishna wasn't here. They're remembering that he wasn't present. And they're also thinking very soon he's going to be gone. There's some connection between these different beliefs. Sanatana Goswami goes on to explain about this dainya for ourselves. Now he's not speaking about the gopis, but he's speaking about us. Yaya vachaya dainyam matya chaistaryam etitat tam yatnina bhajit vidvams tad virudhani vajayat. That if you're actually an intelligent person, vidvan, then you should cultivate this dainya, and you should fix that thinking. Should fix yourself. Styra means to fix in utter humility. You should cultivate it. And how do you cultivate it? You cultivate it with your body, with your mind, and your words. And this is an important point. It's an interesting point. Sometimes devotees, they say that oh, humility is just a show. Just like I one sannyasi friend of mine who later got married. And the last thing I heard, he was working a job as a prison guard in prison somewhere. He still remembers the devotees sometimes, but he was a big jokester, and he used to make a joke sometimes. He would say, "Oh, Prabhuji, please accept my offenses and excuse me for my obeisances." We just the opposite of what we say. And he's making a joke, and he was preaching to us in the sense that we're saying, "Oh, Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances and forgive me for my offenses," but it's just something we're saying with the lips. So he's making a joke out of that. So someone may think, as some devotees sometimes say, that really there's no point in this so-called humility. Rather, we should just be what we are. We should just be genuine. And sometimes even they say you should just go and punch them in the nose. Some other devotees should just chastise the devotees. But this is not what Sanatana Goswami is saying. Sanatana Goswami is saying you should cultivate it with your body, mind, and words. And this is Vedic culture. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Chaitanya Siksastaka, which Prabhupada considered one of his most important writings, he gives a long section about the importance of planting trees, the importance of digging wells, the importance of building pukurs next to the road to Jagannath Puri. What is the necessity of that? By itself, it's not one of the angas of bhakti. But because if you do that, if you build a well, if you plant a tree, especially a fruit tree, and some sadhu is on his way to Jagannath Puri, and the sun is very, very hot, and he sits under that tree to get some shade, and he drinks some water from that well, then you're going to get some bhakti and mukhi sukriti. You'll get some sukriti just by doing that thing and serving people. But if one sadhu, Sudha Vaishnav comes, then you get bhakti and mukhi sukriti. So similarly, I've seen in Vedic culture and Indian culture, it's still the fact today, that when a junior person comes before a senior person, they touch their feet. The children touch the feet of the father or the mother. It's a common thing. The wife often touches the feet of the husband. And someone may say, but they're not really doing that with sincerity. Maybe not. But still, they cultivate this. And Sanatana Goswami says that if you're vidvan, if you're a wise person, a learned person, you should do like this because it's going to help you. Why? Because if you give respect to all persons, you may give respect one day to the good person, to someone who's actually a qualified person. Or alternatively, you may give respect to someone who's not qualified, but later they become qualified. And they remember you, and they give some blessing. So there's no loss in being humble. There's no loss in giving respect to everyone. Sanatana Goswami goes on to explain, Paripakena dainyasya prema jasaram vitanyate parasparam tayo itam karya karana tekshate. So he says, when dainya fully matures, paripakena dainyasya, when dainya becomes paripakena, prema jasaram vitanyate, then prema, like a lotus flower, starts unfolding. He says, therefore, parasparam, there's an exchange, there's a relationship between dainya, humility, and prema, karya, karana, tikshate. Each of them is the cause and effect of each other. In our case, we're cultivating humility because it's good for us. But for the gopis, and for us, if we cultivate humility, we may come to the point of prema. But we see in the case of the gopis, they've gotten prema, they have prema, and their humility is rising. So these two things are non-different from each other. And we see in so many different ways, the gopis, the Rupa Goswami describes in his Padyavali, he explains many different heartfelt prayers of the gopis in Padyavali. Nityan Vayu Vigurnitai, Savitapar, Gayan Alinam Rutai, Muchan Ashimaranda Bindu Biralam Romanchevanan Karai, Makanda Pimukunda Murchititava, Smitya Nirindavane, Bruhi Prana Samana Chaitasi Katam, Namapi Nayati Te. After Krishna's left Vrindavan, one of the gopis is speaking this verse in madness and separation. And she's speaking about a mango tree there in Vrindavan. And she says, this mango tree It's overwhelmed, remembering you. And Nityan Vayu Viguranitai, it's Vigurnita, it's become agitated by the Vayu, by the wind, and Nitya, it's dancing. This mango tree, its branches are moving around, and it's singing in the form of the bumblebees, it's shedding tears in the form of honey, its hairs are standing on end, in the form, it says, Romanchavana Ankarai, in the form of the new sprouts that are on the mango tree. He says, Om Mukunda, Krishna, how is it that this tree has so much love for you? And I'm so hard-hearted. They say, Chetasikatam namapi nayati te. How is it that my heart is so hard that even your name won't enter my heart? Name is a very subtle thing. Name is just some sound. But that name can't enter my heart. My heart is so hard. But here we see this mango tree. The Gopis are saying the mango tree is dancing in ecstatic love, remembering you. It's crying. It's singing in the form of the bumblebees. So this is the nature of the love of the Gopis. I wanted to speak a number of things in this session. I think I'm going to start again in the next week's session with some of these points. I just like to summarize a little bit now, and we'll go ahead and finish. So if anybody has any reflections or comments, questions or anything, this will be the time for it. Nice to see Natalia here and Hari Sankirtan Prabhu and Boni time. So the Gopis of Vrindavan, they're in their madness, they're saying one thing, that Krishna remembered us, and they're telling Krishna, don't you know you remembered us and you came during the Ras Leela, you danced with us. And then the next moment, they're forgetting all about that. And the next moment, they start glorifying previously they were criticizing the nature of Mathura because there's no Vrindavan forest there. There's no Braj Bhavan in Mathura, and Krishna's not going to get proper happiness there. So the Gopis were feeling unhappy about that. But then the next moment, the Gopis are thinking, actually, the ladies in Mathura are giving Krishna so much pleasure. Why will Krishna want to come back to us? So it seems contradictory, but it's not contradictory. And in this 47th chapter, the 10th canto, it's a very, very important chapter. Mahaprabhu is reciting this chapter. He's in the mood of this chapter here in Jagannath Puri because this chapter teaches us the mood of the Gopis in separation. And it's a separation which is the gift of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, the gift of this Gaudiya Sampradaya. And if we can understand the mood of the Gopis in this 47th chapter of the 10th canto, when they're speaking now to Uddhava, this message back to Krishna, then we can understand something about the meaning of the meeting in Kurukshetra. And ultimately, we can understand something about Gauranga Mahaprabhu and his feelings in Jagannath Puri and what he's come to give to us. So I want to stop there. And if anybody has any reflections or comments or anything, this is the time for it. Anybody want to share anything? Let's see. I'll type something in, or we'll go ahead and stop today. Anybody here? Any reflections or anything? How to show? Krishna Kun's not here to translate. Okay. Okay, so we'll stop there, and I think we'll continue because I'd really like to connect these things with the Siksastaka prayers too, and show how these things are connected there. It's really very, very beautiful discussion. So I want to thank everybody very much. This is our Life and Soul. Oh, Ronnie Typer was raising his hand. You want to unmute yourself? Would you make some comment?
Yeah, if it's possible, thank you very much, you, for again repeating these beautiful comments and beautiful not I don't say informations, but beautiful, flower garden, which is helping us to really appreciate and really go into this deep topic, which is for me is very high. So I'm practicing bhakti, and I'm fighting against my anarthas. So understanding the gopis is impossible, but still some reflections coming up into my mind, which is your devotions reflection in me. as you told that at the first part that the gopis are speaking one by one and other gopis are speaking, but it's not like we are alone in this material world and we are in one mood and my friend is in another mood and we just separated. But if immediately these gopis are speaking, the others also listening them, and that listening is so deep that they change also. So not just someone speaking in separation, someone is joining, they reflect each other. It's a beautiful mood should be. I can understand from your previous classes that that's like a like-minded devotees association, sangha. It's a beautiful picture, and you made it uh, understand, not under feeling, And thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Guru Thakur. I appreciate that. We often quote this verse, 11:3:30 in the Bhagavatam, my favorite verse. Parasparana katanam pavanam bhagavad. So this should be paraspara, this should be back and forth. And this is how we associate. Why is that so important? Because this is the way the gopis associate. The gopis are feeling separation from Krishna, so what do? They come together and they express those feelings. And as you're commenting, by expressing those feelings, then the other gopis, by hearing those feelings, then it comes to them, it comes to their heart. This is really Bhagavatam class. As you said, it's not just giving some information, just giving some points. Although, at the same time, we're as my Guru Maharaj once told me, you just repeat what you've heard from your guru and the previous acharyas and don't think that it belongs to you. So we're just repeating that. It doesn't really belong to us. But by repeating it, it may come to our hearts. We want to meditate on this. We've all come, but by the mercy of Doyal Nitai Vijay Gauranga, to this movement. And by their mercy, we're appreciating Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so kind. But how can we really understand the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu unless we understand what led up to it, which is this Brahmara-gita, which is a meeting in Kurukshetra, which is all these things. And therefore, our Goswamis are given us Brihad Bhagavatam, to Mukta Charit, and Ujjalila and many other things, not just to talk about Krishna, but to help us understand Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because we can't get Krishna unless we understand Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's my reflection, your reflection. Thank you very much for taking part, Prabhu. What time is it there in the morning right now? I'm afraid to ask.
No, it's 4:30.
4:30. Okay. Thank you very much for giving us your Sangha, Prabhuji. I appreciate it. I hope we can see you sometime soon in person. You have something, Krishna, you want to share? Listen, the mic's not working, so you got to speak. You're in a good spot. Just speak real loud there.
Just a very simple point that really kind of connected in my heart, hopefully, during this session. Thank you very much. When you spoke about how this part, you would say, is the most important part of the Bhagavatam, because all the Goswami literature, a lot of the Goswami literature, is about Krishna living Vrindavan and why and how. Because without understanding that, we cannot understand Brahmara-gita, and we cannot understand Mahaprabhu's feelings, and we cannot understand what the gopis are feeling. And I somehow just never really connected it, that that's the reason we want to go deep in Bhagavatam, because we just want to understand what the gopis are feeling, because this is what we would like in our heart, because Prabhupada so much stressed to us that this feeling of separation is the mood of our Sampradaya, and this is what we should aspire for. So somehow it just connected.
In the Chaitanya Bhagavad, it says, Prema Moyi Bhagavat, the Krishna Rishiyanga, that the Bhagavatam is made out of Krishna Prema, and is part of the body of Krishna. This is a Bhava Grantha. This is not a Grantha like the Upanishads or Vedanta Sutra, where it has a lot of information. You should understand how you're not your body or anything. But this is a book which teaches us about feelings. And this 47th chapter gives us the feelings of the gopis. You want to add something else, Krishna?
And this is also because it's Nam Purana. So by chanting, this will come to our heart. But we need to hear so that at the time of chanting, it can arise from our Gurudevas.
Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else? Do you want to add something, Brenda Devi? She can translate for you. This is the Russian language comments.
Vindadevi was saying that what she wanted to just remind us of was how the Gopis understand Krishna's feelings so deeply that they understand that he will not be happy without their love and their service, even though there are beautiful women in Mathura.
It's a really important point because in our last session we spoke about this, how the Gopis are unhappy. Oh, Krishna's not going to be pleased because we're not there. And so that may sound like they're really proud. But then indirectly, the Gopis themselves answer that point by the verses we're reading today when they go on to glorify the ladies of Mathura and think how Krishna must be actually happy there and he doesn't really want us and need us. And now this is an expression of their dainya, their humility. Something else, Krishna?
I've been thinking so much about this point that Brihad Bhagavatamrita makes, that Sanatana Goswami makes about prema and dainya ultimately not being different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I understand it in spite of thinking about it so much and hearing about it.
Well, he says that karya, karna, that they're in effect, they karya, karna, tikshate, they cause each other. They're in cause and effect with each other. It's not that they're non-different, but they're in cause and effect with each other. If we have humility, then we're going to get the ashirvad, the blessing of some great Mahatma. In Bhaktistu Bhagavad Bhakti Sangena Parijayate, the only way to get bhakti is by the blessing of a great personality. If we please them by humility, then we may get that bhakti. And then when we get that bhakti, we're going to get humility, real humility. I give an example sometimes, you probably heard, when I was a young boy, we lived in a house that had no electricity and no running water. It was very rare in America. It was an old 200-year-old wooden house. And we had a tea well, a pump well. And that well, you could pump it all day long and not one drop would come out. But to get water out, we learned you have to take some water in a cup and you pour the water into the well, into the mouth of the well. And then when you pour that water in, there's another cup inside the well, and that water goes in, and then that goes down. So we call that, in English, you call it priming the well. So you pour water in to get water out. So in a similar way, we put humility, which may not be real, but we put humility in, and then humility comes out, real humility comes out. Okay? So we'll go ahead and stop there. Let's one more point here maybe. Gaurani Thakur comments, I think Raghunath Das Goswami's Manasiksha teaching the dynamic of giving up pride and be humble. And praying, Raghunath Das Goswami gets into this so much. It's such a very, very important subject matter. Okay, thank you all very much. This is our happiness of our week to have a little Bhagavatam. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Binda ki jai, Vanchakalpa Tarubhishcha, Kripa Sindhudeva Chapahitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Ananda Koti Vaishnava Binda ki jai.